Come on, I know you have. I'm excited today, everybody. Do this. Let's turn to the audience. Are you guys excited? Well, no wonder you're excited because we're going to talk to an expert in palliative care. Please put your hands together, or if you're at your laptop, just sit there. Just sit there and look at the. It's fine. We're used to it. Dr. Elizabeth Holman, howdy do.
No.
Elizabeth, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Put your name down there, just like it's fancy. Well, I'm so
Oh,
glad you joined
I
us.
can't-
I'm going to ask you, Elizabeth, to introduce you and your job title. I know you're a PsyD. I don't even know what that is, but I do know that, Elizabeth, if we talk about which hospital you represent, a hospital that everybody knows about, if we do that, then we get in trouble with your legal department. So we just skipped a lot of steps by not mentioning that, and I would just invite you to remember that Google probably could tell. But we're not saying that, lawyers. If you're watching, lawyers. Elizabeth, who are you? What do you do?
I'm sorry. What was your? I was trying to fix the spelling on my name.
Oh,
I
I'll do
misspelled
that
my.
for you. You do look a little goofy, don't you? I can do this. I have the power. Did I do it right? That looks right.
Thank you. Okay, now I can concentrate.
Hi. You are a PsyD.
Hi.
You're a palliative care expert. What is your job title?
Palliative care psychologist.
Okay.
That's boring.
And and for I bet there's a lot of people like me who mix up hospice and palliative care. What in the world is palliative care?
Super glad you asked. So palliative, actually, the word palliative, it comes from a Latin word that literally means to comfort. It literally means to cloak, but the connotation is comfort, right? So think about like on a cold day like this, just being wrapped in a warm cloak. And so that's what our team does. We wrap people in comfort and caring. And we work with people with serious illnesses and at end of life. So hospice, if you think of palliative care as an umbrella, hospice is like one piece under the umbrella. Hospice care is for people whose life expectancy is measured in months rather than days,
Mhm.
and who are not, or months rather than years, and who are not pursuing like curative efforts. So hospice is definitely a piece, but palliative care is much bigger. It's really for folks who have any kind of serious medical illness that impacts their comfort and their quality of life.
Oh, that's totally not what I thought. Um, I probably should have done a little bit more work on Google, right? I probably should.
Oh, not a
So,
surprise.
in my mind, you mostly have been working with people who are very ill and death is imminent, but I'm not hearing that.
I mean, sometimes it is. I think one of the reasons why my job is completely interesting and challenging is that most of my work and my team's work, so I should say that palliative care is a really interdisciplinary specialty. So we have physicians, social workers, nurse practitioner, chaplains, psychologists, dog, kind of this full meal deal aimed at comfort and quality of life for our patients who have serious illnesses. And so we don't ever really know. Most of my work is in the hospital. And when I go in, I don't know, are we going to get a consult on like, hey, this guy has a new mass and we think it might be cancer. We'd like you to get to know him. It could be this is this person's like seventh hospitalization in a year because their lung disease is worse. Can you talk to them about their goals for their care? And it could be the family has decided to compassionately extubate this person at 2 o'clock. Can you be there? So really kind of a range.
Not always. That I didn't hear any happy clouds and sunshine in that range. It was kind of a dark range, is what I'm saying.
Kind of a dark range. But it's it's the territory in people's lives it's that really matters. You have this amazing privilege of being present in people's lives at what I've heard a writer named Kate Braystrip, she calls them hinge moments.
Hmm.
So the moment life swings from one thing to another. And we can't stop it being that moment, but we can accompany them, we can bring them comfort, we can help them navigate what seems like a really scary what is can be a very scary and overwhelming system. um, So people are going to have to do hard, painful things, but we see to it that they don't have to do them alone.
Oh, well, Dr. Holman, and may I call you Dr. Holman?
You may call
Uh,
me Elizabeth.
Dr. Elizabeth Holman. Here's what I have learned from doing these interviews. It is so much more fun. My interviews are always better, Elizabeth, at the end than they are at the beginning. So, with your permission, I would like to start at the end.
I love it.
If you we're gonna play a game. You can, if you choose to play this game with me. Here's the deal. I'm gonna ask you random questions. Your job is to answer without thinking. Deal?
I'll do my
I'm
best.
not. I'm not gonna ask you anything embarrassing. Let's start with Netflix. What do you when you're watching TV and you're watching a kind of a guilty pleasure? What are you watching recently?
Um, I'm crushed that Great British Bake Off and Queer Eye. I've like run through everything in those. So now I'm sort of casting about on Netflix for the
That,
next great thing.
that's funny because I think they're similar, but I like the baking show, but Queer Eye. That show just makes me feel good, like
Yeah.
a comforting warm blanket, to quote a friend. And who wouldn't want five guys who were charming and articulate and lovely, and they come in and say, they just shower us with compliments. Oh, that looks so good on you. Oh my gosh, you're killing it.
Right. And they're just like, you have this inner beauty, and we're just going to find it. We're going to love
I
you.
know.
Yes. Yes. Let's do that.
What
Because some
human
beauty is well concealed.
do you feel like watching Queer Eye and those people just shower people with really well meant compliments? Do you feel like you use some of that at work?
Well, I think in the sense that um, that they I feel like they really look for the very best in people and they look for their strengths. And I definitely do that.
Do you find yourself being, because they're among other things encouragers? Do you feel that rubs off on you?
I think so. I mean, I try to be encouraging. I once had a client say at the end of our work together, I feel like sometimes you believed in me more than I believed in myself. Like, that's lovely.
Oh, I love that. All right, Dr. Holman, we get in your car and the stereo comes on. What would we be listening to today? If it just turns
Uh,
on automatically.
just like automatically, I am such a goober. It's probably NPR.
Hmm.
Um, it could also be cello music on account of I'm learning to play the cello.
Oh, I love that. And so when you say cello music, like, what's your bag?
Um, oh, so I'm learning out of the Suzuki book, which is hilarious because I'm like, I'm on book two, I'm doing great. And you open book two and it's like, the child should practice every day and you're like, ah, damn it. Comes with a CD that, like, someone who knows what they're doing is playing the tunes that I'm learning. So I listen to the CD and then I'm like, oh, that.
Plus, if I'm right, Elizabeth, that CD has like a piano accompaniment that you can play with. Do you do
Yes.
that?
Sometimes, although I have this awesome teacher who also will, we're doing Zoom lessons right now, but she'll record the accompaniment on her cello and then send me the file so I can listen to it in my little earbuds.
Is your cello in that office with you?
No.
Oh, ah, I wanted that. I wanted it. I did. I did. Just talking to somebody else. All right. So, tell me a little bit about music. You didn't mention music other than instrument. You mentioned the cello, but you didn't mention a style. If you're listening to music, what are you listening to?
um, we've lately discovered Rhiannon Giddens at our house.
Who's it?
She Rhiannon Giddens. She sings really interesting range of like folk and sometimes country, and she just has this unbelievable voice, just this huge, rich voice.
All right. You get extra credit for coming up with an artist I haven't met yet. I will look up Rhiannon. How do we feel about pop music? What's your favorite pop?
Um, this is so embarrassing. Um,
Good.
Probably haven't listened to any pop music like since I was in college, and so it's probably like great. greatest hits from the 80s.
You are. Well, you and I are the same age. It'd be the. Isn't it weird that classic music is the music we grew up with?
Right? You're like, well, the grocery store is crushing it these days with their piped in music.
When we were in high school, when the oldie station played this crappy music, like pre rock and roll, not
Totally.
okay. How do,
Not
I got two girls in my house. We are a Taylor Swift house. How do you feel about Tay Tay?
um, I don't know a lot about her, but I feel like she's kind of an empowerment sort of woman, and I like that. I kind of don't know her music very much. I'm such a dinosaur.
Well, I was gonna say, like, if you worked with really young kids, you would know more. But you work with people who are, I'm guessing, one generation past you.
Many of my patients think I'm like, I'm actually the age of some of their children. So,
What are you doing to blow off steam during the pandemic?
other than learning to play the cello, which is really, I have to say, like, can I just talk about that for a sec? Because it's so
Please.
great. Um, I started it just before the pandemic, but I've never played a stringed instrument. I'm in my 50s. And there's something really fantastic about learning something new at this age, right? Because I don't have to worry about making first chair. I don't have to worry about like going to the state orchestra. I don't, some days it sounds like there's a goose trapped in there. That's fine. Because like every once in a while I get this fleeting moment of beauty, and like that's plenty. I think learning totally new things as an adult is something that we don't do all that often. I think once we're past like our 20s, we're just sort of refining skills we already have. And so to pick up something that is completely new and challenging, some days is so frustrating, but then some days it's fantastic.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, and so good on you for learning something new. Why do you think that is? That as we age, we don't want to try something new.
I mean, I think speaking for myself, there is always that kind of that fear of failure, like, oh, I'm not going to be good enough. What if I can't do it right? I think also it's hard. I mean, we just like, I think when we're younger, everything is new and everything is hard, and we sort of like expect things to be hard. Then I think we hit kind of our 20s and 30s and start to feel like, okay, I'm starting to figure out who I'm going to be when I grow up. And it can be a little tough to challenge ourselves to do something really different. Um, yeah, and there's not that support around us. If you're a teenager and you try something new, your parents are like, "Yay, we're so proud of you."
I know.
You know, if you're a grown up and you say like, "I want to take on something completely new," people are like, "Huh."
Oh well, good. Yeah, good for you. Good. Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
I think you're on it. And for me, the word incompetence comes up, meaning as we age, we're used to being competent, and we don't like being incompetent. And you start, in your case, you start a brand new string instrument that is not an instrument that is easy. You're incompetent, and who wants to do that? So it's hard.
Right. Right. And you do have to put yourself, like I was joking about reading in the book, like the child should practice this 3 times a week. And you're just like, okay, to sort of step back into that role. Nobody likes to give up power.
What? Nobody likes to give up power. So tell me what that means. That is fascinating.
Well, um, I mean, I think we're seeing that play out sort of in national politics, but in all kinds of ways, it's empowering to feel like you know what you're doing. And it sucks. You feel really vulnerable when you don't know what you're doing, or when you don't have, yeah, mastery. And so to sort of step into an arena where you don't have any power or
Mhm.
control or
I get it.
very little, that's not a place that most of us want to be.
That's so interesting to me that you use that very good word power as because we were talking about incompetence, and then we're linked to power. I think you might be onto something, Doctor Holman.
Right. And I think, yeah, I won't go off on that, but I do think sometimes we like to do things we're good at because it is empowering. Even as simple as like I love to walk and I love that feeling of just like my body moving through space. I'm not fast, I'm not graceful, but like it's just feels so good just to be moving. And you can go places and you can see things, and yeah, there's something really lovely about that.
Well, let's go forward with this power and incompetence thing. So when you came to your current profession, do you remember a time early on when you realized, holy crap, I'm actually pretty good at this? That maybe you got past some anxiety and imposter syndrome and went, maybe I'm okay at this. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think I've had that experience most when I'm like interviewing people who are applying for like internship as like psychology internships, or kind of people will say, tell us about your job, and it's as I'm describing my job that I have this little like out of body moment, and I think, wow, she kind of sounds like she knows what she's talking about.
Listen to her talk about this profession without notes.
Exactly.
Well, there must have been. Can you tell us about a time maybe you were working with a patient and you realized, nailed it. I did what was needed there.
Yeah, what sticks out for me is a patient from several years ago who had a new liver cancer diagnosis and and he was a younger guy, like in his 50s, and was just shocked. And I was in his room with some of my colleagues, and for whatever reason, sometimes it works, you go in as a group, but people sort of talk mostly with one person in the group. And so I was sort of the person that he talked with most. And I didn't do anything other than just listen, but I listened really carefully. And he just sort of poured out what he was thinking and what he was afraid of. And um, afterwards, it felt really great in the moment to just feel really connected to him. And afterwards, my colleagues were like, "You really listened to him," which I guess I don't always realize is a really specific skill. But yeah, in that moment, I was like, "Oh, I think I'm bringing something to this."
Aw, but could you say that again? I wasn't really listening. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right, so this is a skill undoubtedly you were aware of you had before you entered this profession, right? People kind of like to talk to Elizabeth Holman. Is that an accident? Did you end up in this listening profession on purpose?
Um, no, actually. I mean, I had this kind of non-linear route to this profession because I I studied religion as an undergrad and then did graduate school, and then I worked in education policy for several years, but it didn't like animate me. It didn't. I would go to these like conferences and we would talk about education
Right.
policy, and then you'd go to dinner afterwards, and you know what they wanted to talk about? Education policy. For the love of God, can we talk about something else? But at the time, I thought, I hope someday I get to find something that I love so much that after having done it all day, I want to go talk about it at dinner. But I was clear that that wasn't education policy. So then I worked in mediation and high conflict divorce, and that was so delightful. It drove me to graduate school at an advanced age. So I didn't start my psychology degree till my late 30s. And I initially went thinking I would have better skills for doing this high conflict work in the courts, and in the court system. But once I got into it, I realized, hey, there's other things you can do. I don't have to go back to that work. And I just really remembered how much I loved working in the health field. And so that was how I ended up kind of pursuing health psychology. And I think it wasn't, when you're first learning something, you're learning like all the techniques, right? You're learning like, how does this piece work and how does that
Right.
piece work? What's the protocol? And it takes a few years to feel comfortable enough with the techniques that you can keep those in your back pocket and just really show up. So
Yeah, let's go there because I'm super interested in that. Like, I'm assuming we both agree that as you grow in your profession, you become more confident, and that confidence serves your ability to do well, right?
Mhm.
But if you're like me, I'm starting out, I don't have so much confidence, which sabotages you, right? So how do you, like, did you go that way? Did you just hit the ground running like I am master of this universe, or were you more of a oh shit, I'm supposed to know all this stuff and I don't know if I do?
Definitely the latter. I A thing that I sometimes, a little graphic that I draw like for my interns that are working with me is, if you think of like a quadrant, a square, and one quadrant is like I don't know what I don't know. And then the next one is I do know what I don't know. And then the next one is I know what I know. And then the next one is I don't know what I know. Right? So at the beginning, when you're just starting something, like when I showed up, at grad school, I'm like, oh, I guess there's going to be a lot to learn. And then you sort of move into like, holy camole, there is so much that I don't know. And that lasts for a really long time. And then you start to feel like, okay, I'm kind of, those moments where you catch yourself and think, I just nailed it. Like, oh, I think I know what I'm doing. It takes a long time to get around to that fourth quadrant where it's so automatic you're not even aware of how much you know.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because I'm interested in performance and like the performance side of our jobs, regardless of what your job is, and somehow, regardless of what your performance is, I think people can sense that doubt, and that's a bummer. It makes us less good.
Well, I mean, I was thinking about how you built your career. I mean, I remember like you started out doing magic and then you were doing like magic and comedy and you were doing the college circuit and like the flyers with the hanger in the head
How
and
do you remember that? Wow.
um and it feels like, yeah, I wonder if in retrospect if that was your like quadrant 2 and 3, like where you were figuring out what you know and what you don't know. And then as you moved more into the motivational speaking, you were like, now I'm solid. Now I got this. Now I know that I can connect with that audience and that they want to connect with me. And I know how to say I know the place that'll make them laugh. I know the place that'll make them cry.
I really like this way this is going. I thought it was an interview about her, and now she's talking about me. This is exactly okay. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Oops, turn it. Come. No, no. Where'd you go? I lost my. Dang it! I had that cool technology. Dang it. Beth, where did you go? Oh, I can't believe this.
I'm lost.
Elizabeth,
Good.
don't give up on me. Let me fix this.
Oh.
Ah, there we go. Ah, can you believe it? Well, we have a nice little comment in here. Let me bring this in. Oh, this is from another doctor. I think mammals
Oh,
can smell fear. Some take more advantage of it than others. Hmm. Well, what do you think?
that
In this case, Elizabeth, is smell a metaphor?
probably yes and no, actually. I mean, I think, we think we're so sophisticated and, we have like computers that fit in the palm of our hand and we can get in a car and drive ourselves anywhere. But at the end of the day, we're still creatures. And I think we are as ruled by things like scent and light as any other creature. And there's definitely a metaphoric level too, right? Because if you walk in someplace and you're a novice, they start fighting over who gets to keep your ear, right? Like, you know.
You work in a tough hospital. That's all I can say. All right.
Actually, yeah, not
So
where I work.
one of my fascinations is mood and culture and levity and lightheartedness and jokes and humor. You work in a world where that doesn't seem that funny. So how in the heck do you handle it personally? Meaning, you go deal with a guy who just got a liver cancer diagnosis. Then you got to go come home, talk to your wife, and say like, "Oh, my day was great." How do? What's the deal with that? That's got to be brutal.
Um, yes and no. I mean, actually, there is a great deal of humor. I think one of the things that's so fantastic about my team at work, and part of the reason why we are so functional as a team, quite honestly, is that as I tell people who are thinking about being with us as learners, I'm like, we are not always appropriate. Just telling you right now. F-bomb Fridays are a thing. Sometimes Friday occurs on Tuesday. Um, so
Wait,
when we
what is that? F-bomb Friday. What is that?
just by the end of the week, we are dysregulated, disinhibited, like anything comes out of our mouth. Um, and sometimes that happens all week long. And so we meet as a team every morning and we kind of talk about, who we're going to see and what's going on. But
Just Pettit, I love this group because of your humor. All right. Just Pettit likes F-bombs. I'm just thinking. I don't know.
Good job, Jess. I mean, even our chaplain laughed one day when somebody said like, it's F-bomb Friday, and she just went, um, but it is sort of a way of blowing off steam, right? And it's not at the expense of our patients. It's more kind of at the expense of ourselves or our colleagues, not colleagues, but the institutional foolishness that occurs in any institution. But so that is incredibly helpful. I will say also at work that I, many years ago, started a file on my, like a Microsoft Word document, titled Funny Hospital Things. And are like little tiny scraps of notes that are amusing or funny things that come out over the loudspeaker. Or one day, this is my very favorite, on the wall in our old nursing home, there was a hand-lettered sign stuck to the wall that said, dry paint.
Was that a joke? It had to be a joke.
I don't like what like is that a description? Is it a call to action? Like what happens when it like so that if you have an eye for the things that are humorous, you will find them in any setting. And which is not to say that there aren't days that are heartbreaking, right? Like there's days that are so sad and moments that are so sad. And I think that's okay too, to show up. Part of showing up with people means it's okay for them to see that their grief touches you. Mm. So, my colleagues and I, we always say it's okay to like tear up. It's not okay if you're sobbing because you don't want them to feel like they have to take care of you. But it's okay. It's okay to be sad.
Well, let me go back a half a step to the humor. Have you ever been caught? And here's what I mean. I love working for healthcare groups and palliative care. You people are easy to make laugh because you have some freaking dark humor is what you have. But when I'm in front of a group like you, no one else is listening. And so I can say out loud, no one's going to hear these jokes, right? And they're like, it's funny. And then it's kind of free reign to tell jokes that would be horrible if a family member heard them. And I was working for some emergency room people, and I can't remember the hospital, but in the emergency room, there was some plaque up or a sign saying, basically, if you see us laughing or smiling, this is how we stay sane in order to give the best care possible. And please don't think that we're doing anything disrespectful. So that's what I mean by being caught. Have you ever had F-bomb Friday, or you say something circling the drain, or some phrase that you might use internally and then you get caught?
Shockingly, I can't think offhand of any time that's happened, which is very surprising because, as my spouse will tell you, my mouth just runs away with me sometimes and I do get in trouble. But I feel like probably that has happened. Maybe I've repressed it. I can't remember.
All right, because it seems to me, and I'd love to know what you think. Those of you who have difficult professions emotionally, so anybody in a hospital, but also like firemen, cops, their humor is crazy scary, but I'm convinced it's also crucial.
Yeah, it's about metabolizing, right? And it's also, the other thing that I tell, again, I sort of tell learners, sorry, I'm wiggling in my chair. I think what's interesting and challenging about this work is that the part of you that's just deeply compassionate, that can look at someone and think, oh, that is hard. That is a tough way to go. Or, oh my gosh, they're suffering. That part has to run alongside the part of you that's like, oh, that is super interesting. Right? Like, unfortunately, the jillions of ways that humans' minds and bodies can go wrong, many of them are completely fascinating. And you sort of, I think you can't do this work if you don't have both the compassion piece and that just intellectual curiosity. You just have to be profoundly curious. And then there's also times um, when you, also the humor just has to ride alongside. Like, all right, let me tell you a story, if I may. The
Story, story, story.
My colleague and I, a physician colleague and I, were saying farewell to a patient who had come in. He was a guy who like lived kind of out on the Eastern Plains, pretty much by himself. He came in for what he thought was just sort of a mild upper respiratory thing. Turned out his lung disease, he had COPD. It had progressed to the point that it was never going to get better, and he was going to need to go home on hospice. And so that was a huge blow to him. And then we, while he was in the hospital, helped him reconnect with an estranged son who came and visited and brought grandchildren he didn't even know.
Oh,
This kind of beautiful thing, right? So, so we were saying goodbye to him and, you know, wishing him well. And he was saying how much he's looking forward to going home to be with his little cats who were named like Snowflake and Tinkerbell. And
oh.
he says, girls, I gotta tell you, I just thank you so much for everything you've done. And when I leave this world and go up to heaven, I'm going to be looking out for you. And we're like, oh, that's so lovely. And we're tearful. And he says, but if my neighbor comes around before that, I'm going to shoot that motherfucker right in the forehead. And we're like, what?
Boy, that is a whiplash right there.
Totally. And you just like, oh, that is hilarious, right? Like that was
Yeah,
years ago. It's still hilarious. And forgive me, I don't know if I can say those words, but I'm sure you bleep them if necessary.
I'm pretty sure it's too late. It was a direct quote. Thank you very much. It was a direct quote. She didn't say it. I want to get back because I sort of led into it, but we somehow skipped over it too quickly. You deal with death a lot, right? You lose patients, and I've never had that happen, but I've seen it on TV, and so I'm just trying to figure out how you do that, constantly dealing with people who are in a or dying, or they're thinking about dying, or they're getting ready to die, and then their family's sad, and then you come home and gotta walk your dog. I, I just how is that? I don't even know the right question, but it just seems so messed up to me.
Um, I mean, on some level, it is right. Like it's often tragic when, especially, I think for me, the grief of people left behind is very hard. Um, and there's times that we can be present for people in those really hard moments, and that feels really meaningful. Like we had a guy who was dying of COVID, and his wife could not be present with him because he had COVID and she had COVID, so she
Oh,
couldn't even come in. So I got on the phone with her and just checked in to see how she was doing. And I asked her, "Is there any? Does your husband have any music that he loves?" And she said he liked oldies, and as previously noted, that could be my favorite music, or it could be even older than that. But he also liked that song "Dream the Impossible Dream" from Man of La Mancha. And I said, "Okay, that's good to know." And I said, "Is there anything you would want him to know?" And she said, "Just like that he's the love of my life." So I said, "I'm going to go to his room, and I'm just going to stand outside his room, and I can't go in, but I'm just going to like send him love from right outside the door from you."
hmm.
And I said, like, I have no scientific basis for this. There's no study, but I am here and I can do this. And she said that would mean so much. So my colleague, physician colleague, and I went. My physician colleague actually went into his room and told him this message from his wife, and she pulled up "Dream the Impossible Dream" on her iPhone and played that for him and held his hand as he was dying. And I just like stood outside the room and was able to see that he was so comfortable. And we could tell his wife his last moments, he wasn't alone. He was listening to his favorite music, and he was receiving love. And like, that's kind of awesome. I mean, it's super, super sad. And it's this enormous privilege, like all in the same space.
Can you hear this? Oh, I can't get it louder. Dang it.
Oh, is it The Impossible Dream? Oh, well done, you. How did you find that?
Sing it, everybody. Help yourself.
Oh, that's great. I guess I also want to say, like,
I'm sorry. That was uncalled for.
no, it was beautimous. Lest I should, do this sort of Pollyanna, like everything is fine. There's days that are super hard, and there's days that suck. And of course, there are some patients to whom you kind of feel more connected for one reason or another than others. And particularly when you lose them, it's heartbreaking. And there's days I come home and I make my spouse cry.
Oh,
Obviously, I don't tell any personal details, but just kind of talking about a situation. And you mentioned walk the dog. That is incredibly restorative for me. I'm outside, I'm walking. I've never ever come back from a walk and not felt better than when I left. Um, I do things like ritual shedding, like roll shedding. So when I come home, I always wash my hands, um, which seems like a small thing, but it's sort of my way of like washing off the day. And I try really hard to leave work at work and um, not carry those things from work home with me. Um, in the old hospital that we previously were in a different hospital, and there was a tree out front that I walked past every day. And so this is so goofy, but I would sort of like coming in the morning, I would notice the tree, I would see how it was changing with the seasons. And then when I was leaving, I would turn around and I would like look up at the hospital and think about the patients and say, like, I'm leaving you in good hands. You're okay. I would see the tree and then I would leave. And so I had this kind of like separation in my mind.
oh. There I was joking around with a dream and impossible dream, and you come up with that poetic stuff. Ah, yeah, I get it. I get that. That even on tough days, if you are able to do your job and add meaning and value to those people who need it desperately, there has to be some emotional reward for that. Even if it and we kind of know how that story is ending. It's not going to be a good story, but you're using your training to do good. Dang it! All right, well let's pivot. You are Dr. Holman. You are the daughter of Dr. Holman. What was it like for you to become a doctor knowing that your dad's a doctor?
That is such a great question. Really interesting because was a kid, when I was a kid, I was going to be a world famous neurosurgeon, or neurologist until I took chemistry and quickly realized that that was not the thing for me. And I just was never really interested in medicine, which I think in some ways was, sadness to my dad. But I think it's probably not accidental that now I'm a psychologist in a medical setting because I've always found people's minds and bodies completely fascinating. I love that I get to learn all the time about what I'm learning. This whole doctor thing is very interesting. Like being a doctor who's not a physician in a medical setting is super interesting. Um, I spent several years trying to figure out how to introduce myself. Um, because if I say I'm Dr. Holman, sometimes people think I'm the physician. But if I say I'm Elizabeth, like I want them to know that I have a level of training and expertise. So now I say I'm Dr. Elizabeth Holman. I'm the psychologist on the team, which, half the time freaks people out. Um, there's the whole thing about wearing a white coat. When I first got to this job, I never wore a white coat. And some of my medical colleagues said, you should definitely get a white coat, if only because you're in and out of patient rooms and, just sort of for cleanness, and you can take it home and wash it. And so I did end up getting a white coat, but I have my name on it in purple and it says psychologist. So kind of trying to differentiate a little bit. Interestingly, when I wear the white coat, I don't find that patients respond to me any differently at all, or families, but I do find that hospital staff respond to me differently.
Wait, with
So
the white
it's,
coat.
yeah, when I have the white coat on. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing to be sort of like part of the club, but not part of the club.
I think that's, it's a uniform, right? You're dressed the role. That years ago there was this magician who, by the way, not my favorite guy, but he was a hustler, meaning he knew how to get work, and part of it was being able to barge into places that he didn't belong. And the technique for that was a stethoscope and a lab coat, because he just felt like I can get anywhere with this. And there's kind of makes me want to get a lab coat and a stethoscope to give it a shot.
Yeah, there's actually really interesting studies, I think, about like this kind of white coat response that people have where you're perceived as having more authority. Um, yeah, but I mean, sometimes it raises people's blood pressure to be around somebody in a white coat. Sort of the flip side of that, and this just makes me ill every time I think about it. We had a medicine fellow with us one year who was African American, and he always carried a stethoscope. And he said, if I don't have my stethoscope, people ask me to move things.
Oh, yes.
Right? Like, oh, that's so gross and such a piece of white privilege that it
Yeah.
never dawned.
I don't even know how to follow up with that. So cleverly, I will pivot.
Nice.
I think I'm not alone when I say, when I'm dealing with people who have suffered a loss. My friend lost their parent or their sister, or my friend got a bad diagnosis. I don't know what to say. And you do that for a living, yo. So I wondered, what have you learned that you can teach us muggles who are not in a white coat when we're dealing with people who are going through icky times? You have good language, I bet. Like, how do you think about that? What do you have repeatable phrases, or what can you teach us?
Actually, one of the things that stayed with me, that brought me so much comfort, that I sometimes, maybe not professionally, but I say to friends, is something that you said to me when my dog died, when my dog Waffle died. And you had just been at a memorial service, and you said, the minister said, this is what comes of loving mortal things. And that has stayed with me forever. That there's a cost to loving things that are mortal, because we lose them. And I think maybe one of the reasons that touched me so much is that it acknowledges how painful the situation is. It doesn't try to fix it. It doesn't minimize. It's really respectful of the loss and respectful of the love. So I
Hmm.
guess those are the guidelines that I go for. Like sometimes I just say to people, this sucks, right? Like that's not a professional thing to say, but it sucks. And to there's nothing you can say that makes it better. But just to just to be present with someone and acknowledge, like, I am so sorry that this is happening, or this is so painful. Um, I think that's all you can do.
That's pretty profound. And by the way, like a get out of jail free card when you say there's nothing you can say to make it better. So that means I don't
There,
have to try to find the right thing to say.
Right. There are things that you can say to make it worse, but those things are things like, I mean, unless you know for certain that the person you're saying this to is going to welcome it, don't say stupid stuff like, well, God needed him.
Ah,
Or like I sometimes do bereavement support for family members of patients that have died. And this one man's wife is so eloquent. And she said, like, I'm really mad at God. And I asked my priest, like, why did my husband die? And he said, well, God needed him. And she's like, no, I needed him. Like, I don't think God needed him that much. I needed him.
yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
yep.
God, you're all powerful. I'm just living here in an apartment. Give me a break.
Right. You got plenty of people up there.
Kim Holdred says,
Um,
respect the loss and respect the love. Very powerful. Thanks, Elizabeth. Aw.
yeah, I think anything that like minimizes their pain, or like time heals all wounds, or, to say to a parent who lost a child, well, you have other children, like no, don't ever, don't ever say anything that minimizes.
Wow. I'm just trying to. I'm saying these are landmines we need to avoid. So don't minimize the loss. Well, like, oh, you've got extra kids. You lost one? You got two left. You're good.
Nope.
It's funny.
Nope.
When my mom died, somebody was helping, and she's with the angels now. That did not help. I just wanted to get out of the room.
Yeah.
But that doesn't follow your advice of just kind of acknowledging that it blows and let them know you're there.
There's there's a verse from the Hebrew Bible, the book of Ecclesiastes, that I think of a lot, and sometimes I share with people, especially when it's like, but he was so young, or he was such a fighter, or something like that, which says, I looked and saw that the race is not to the swift, nor victory to the strong, but time and chance happen to them all.
Wait, one more time. My brain was not fast enough to follow it all. One more time.
I looked and saw that the victory is not to the swift, the race is not to the swift, nor victory to the strong, but time and chance happen to them all.
And help interpret
So,
that
so in
when
other words,
related to
like,
death.
well, I think in particular in this culture where we're sort of taught, like, if you exercise 150 minutes a week and eat, a lot of bran, and, eat whole grains, and you do all the right things and you keep yourself fit, that somehow you're exempt from illness and from death and from really bad luck. I mean, that's what a lot of illness comes down to, is really bad luck. Like I recently had a very serious health issue, and there was a less than 1% chance of me developing this problem. And I did.
That's because you are a high achiever.
Exactly.
Well,
Right?
let's carry this through, because one of the bits of language around illness that really bothers me is the word fight and battle when related to cancer. What's your take on all that? And
So I think it can play some role for people who are are wanting to sort of bolster their internal resilience. Um, and I think overall it can just be profoundly toxic, because the reality is sometimes things happen with our bodies, and there's no amount of fight that there's nothing that we can do as individuals to hold it at bay.
right.
Um, so to say, like, someone's really a fighter, well, yeah. And I guess that's the, like, time and chance happen to them all. Like, people get sick, and sometimes terrible things happen to them, and it's really out of their control. And so to say this implication, like, you just have to stay positive, Like, really? So the people that died, they just weren't positive enough? I don't think so. The people that died just weren't enough of a fighter. That's not how that works. And so it just opens up so much like self blame and guilt. Um, yeah,
Yeah, because
it's just
the problem I have with it is the opposite of winning the battle with cancer is losing the battle to cancer, and that means you're a loser. And
right,
oh, you didn't fight hard enough. You're a wimp, or you're a bad fighter, or you're I don't know.
right. One of the things that we do on my team that I think is really important and helpful is we ask patients, "What are you hoping for right now?" And I think there's almost always something to hope for, and often the hope is more time, but not always. Sometimes the hope um, is this is kind of hackneyed, but like better quality time. Sometimes the hope is I want to get home and sit on my front porch and watch the sunset. Sometimes the hope is I want to um, reconnect with people I'm estranged with. Sometimes it's I want to get my will written. Excuse me. Sometimes it's, I want one more beer, or like who knows, right? But those things that bring us joy, or sometimes it's I don't. My hope is I won't be a burden to my family. I've
Mm.
accepted that this illness, but I don't want to be a burden to my family. And so that's where there's some positivity, even in this, seemingly really depressing role. Like in the system where I work, we can get people into like nursing home care with a supportive hospice, so their family can come and love on them and show up for them, and they don't have to like change their diapers. And
Mm.
not everybody, but for the people that do, it's a tremendous gift. So we can help them achieve the things that they hope for.
I like that idea that you're just asking them because before you start to help, you might as well know what they want.
Right. Because, and honestly, for people who want more time, if that's their value, we fight hard for that. I think sometimes people think of palliative care, well, I mean, there have been people, medical people, who called us like vultures or the death squad. But there's times we're the people in the room saying, no, this person wants more chemo. And, maybe the medical providers are like, I don't know if it's going to help them. We're like, this is in accordance with their goals. Their biggest priority, their highest value is every single treatment, no matter how bad the side effects are, because they want, if nothing else, they want to know they went down swinging, which is back to that fighter thing, right? But for
Right.
some people, their core value. So we will fight really hard for that.
So, hypothetically, somebody says, "I just want one glass of scotch." Would you maybe get that in the hospital accidentally for them?
I
Or
don't think I'm that. Um, I think we have sometimes told family members, like, nobody's searching your bag.
uh, what a weird thing because you have clear rules, and I know I don't mean to put you in an awkward situation and ask you to, confess, but there must be times where you're like, I know what that rule is for, and this isn't it.
Right. I have been known, I mean, I definitely like, I'll go buy somebody. I had one guy that just loved Mountain Dew, and he didn't have family nearby. He was from out of state. And so I would just go to the store and buy a Mountain Dew because that
Oh,
made him so. One time I went out and got somebody a milkshake. Um, so I've done stuff like that.
yeah, I'll bet that felt good for you.
It's sometimes that's the most palliative thing I do. And that's the other funny thing about being the psychologist, right? With all this, like I'm Dr. Holman, I got all this fancy pants learning. And like maybe the most important therapeutic intervention is here's your Mountain Dew.
Right.
Um, but the person feels seen and they feel cared for. That's the
Yeah,
success.
I can picture myself executing that. Like, all right, I'm going to get Mountain Dew, give it to him. That would make me feel good.
Right. And it feels great. And there's times that you can like, okay, this guy's day is not going to suck any less, but, or it's still going to suck, but it sucks a little bit less when he's drinking a Mountain Dew.
Right, he's got that Mountain Dew. You be prepared. Changing the subject. You work with people who are ill and dying. Are you afraid of death?
That's such a good question. Um, I'm afraid of suffering. I mean, there's the famous Woody Allen quote, right? Like, I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens. Um, I don't think I'd go that far, but I really hate the notion of being separated from the people I love. Um, and I don't know. I don't know what comes next. I don't know where we go. Um, I think the thought of like annihilation is really frightening. But I don't think I don't think that's what happens. I don't know. I think I think I've concluded I don't know what happens next, but I think it's something and not nothing. Um, so I guess there's two questions, right? Like there's are you afraid of dying and are you afraid of being dead?
Oh,
Like
I never thought of that. You're right. That is two questions.
yeah, the dying part worries me
Mm.
because the habit of living is really deeply ingrained in us. And it doesn't, life doesn't generally leave our bodies very readily. Dying's hard. Even with, you know, all the medications and all the things we can do for people. And I do think we can keep people really comfortable, but it's still, it's hard. I just think it's not, I think we're designed to keep living. Um, I think that there are things that would be really important to me at the end, like having my family, my loved ones. I want dogs. I want like a ton of puppies on the bed. I want the sunshine coming in the window. I want my nails clean. Like, you know, I think those things about like feeling loved and having dignity, I hope I get those at the end.
Are you ready to die? Yes, look here.
I know, right? Look, I'm all, yeah.
Yeah, I'm terrified of dying. And I'm terrified of being dead. I got
I,
stuff to do, people. Let me ask you about so you're asking what are you hoping for? What do you need? And then you get a variety of answers. Have you been asked for help with assisted suicide?
yes. Yeah.
Oof. What's that?
Um, You know, in a way, it's an easy answer because my hospital doesn't. We can't participate in that. So you know, we sort of have this easy out of sorry, we can't do that. But I think much more importantly, I always want to know like why. What are you worried about? What are you afraid of? What are you hoping to avoid by doing medical aid in dying? um, because it may be that we have resources that can help you so that you can avoid those things without having to make that decision to make use of medical aid in dying. So again, like if someone's worried about being a burden to their family, like we can get you into a nursing home, we can get you home care. If they're worried about being in pain, there's really like hospice services and our, you know, our hospital is not a hospice, but people obviously do sometimes die at the hospital and like we can keep people really comfortable so that they don't have to be in pain and they don't have to be like struggling to breathe and they don't have to be scared. So if those are the things people are afraid of, we have ways to try to help them. I think it's harder. I think sometimes that request for aid in dying is it's just a desire to have a level of control. You know, the data, the best data are out of Oregon, but there's this like 20% of people that get the prescription never use it.
Hmm,
But there's like I've got it in my back pocket. So if things get too bad, I have an out.
right. Well, I think about it with degenerative diseases. My mom died of early onset Alzheimer's, and a mentor of mine, a magician buddy, had Alzheimer's and got his life in order and killed himself. And boy, that was hard to argue with. So, because he could have lived after his brain was dead, he could have lived for another decade. So like all of the things that we're talking about being a burden or whatever, like we're way past that. For that's what that guy's future could have been.
Hmm. I think it's profoundly personal. I mean, for some people, they feel like they have really strong religious or spiritual beliefs that say, no way can I do that. And for other people, that's, that's not the issue. For myself, I guess the other thing I have learned in this work, which I've been doing now for 11 years, amazingly, is that none of us knows until we're in the middle of it. Um, and the things that we might think that we would do, that those things can change.
Right.
Um, so maybe the kind of the most grace we can give ourselves and the people that we love is we want to like get clear on what our wishes are, but also be really open to the notion that like, you know what, like I've seen people say, if I can't go fishing, life's not worth living. And then they reach a point where they can't go fishing, but they're like, you know what, I can sit on the porch and I can feel the sun on my face and I can see the grandkids. So as long as I can wipe my own butt, I'm okay. And then they can't wipe their butt. But like, wow, somebody will come to my house and wipe my butt and I can still talk to my loved ones. Like, sometimes the goalposts
Yeah,
change.
I hear you. By the way, if you ever get that one nailed down to a like digital, exactly right, what is right and wrong, let me know. You could get rich on that one if you figure that one out.
Totally.
Uh, how awesome are you? I like to end every interview with the very same question. So, Dr. Elizabeth Holman, PsyD, palliative care doctor, what gives you hope?
Um, I I think what gives me hope is in the course of my work, I have gotten to see I've gotten to see that everyone is extraordinary. And sometimes people that you wouldn't, I always say, like, if you saw this person in the produce aisle, you might not know this about them. But sometimes people are extraordinarily, nasty or unkind, but much more often, people do these amazing things, especially in their service of caring for others. Um, you know, Going to, like, we had somebody just recently who doesn't really have any family, but and lives in a motel, but the owner of the motel lets him stay there for free. He's been there for 20 years and she's sort of taken him in, and now he's kind of like her uncle, and she takes him everywhere, and like lately she's been feeding him his dinner. Like, that's pretty amazing that there's so much love and so much capacity for selflessness in people that you wouldn't know unless you really just had this particular view of them. And I don't have any idea what their politics are. Um, but and I mean, I guess it's interesting that I went to politics when you asked about hope, because I think the political situation in particular feels hard to feel hopeful about right now. But people across the spectrum have this enormous capacity for grace. So we just have to figure out how to connect with it.
Well, let's just let that sit there for a moment. Everybody is extraordinary. A capacity for selflessness and love.
Yeah.
Aw, that gives me hope. Because I think really we agree on this in that all of the things we can't, to me, the news is so overwhelming. Climate change, fires, and weather, and just all this junk. People fighting in Washington, and then race relations that I can't even begin to understand fully, much less fix. But it does make me feel good that some stranger took in somebody in their hotel and is now feeding them and bonded with them and loving them. That doesn't have anything to say with Confederate flags or Trump or Black Lives Matter or no Blue Lives Matter and whatever.
Right. The poet Wendell Berry has a great line in one of his poems that says, "Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts."
Aw, I love that.
Isn't
Yeah.
that great?
I think for me, what's working, okay, it doesn't work all the time. But just say like, okay, I can't handle those things that I'm reading about in the newspaper, but I can look right in front of the person in front of me and I can be nice to them and I can say Elizabeth Holman was the nicest person to come on the show and I could just say thank you. That's what we can do.
Thank
Oh,
you.
all right, everybody. This is Elizabeth Holman. She works at a hospital that we promised her legal department we would not name. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. This is fun.
Elizabeth, stay with me just a second. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Wash your hands.